tact, and skill in handling management or social connections. One of the nation's outstanding authorities on this vital subject is Dr. Paul P. Parker. He has spoken before more than 5,000 audiences, coached over 250,000 people across the nation on how to use tact and skill in handling people. He is the author of a recently published book on this subject. It is the essence of more than 30 years of Dr. Parker's experience in lecturing, counseling, executive training, and psychological guidance that he presents in this recording.
Many of us overlook the importance of discovering our own abilities. It isn't so much a matter of developing new abilities. We already have an abundance of ability lying dormant deep down within us. Therefore, our real purpose and endeavor should be to develop abilities that we already have. It's generally conceded that very few people ever scratch the surface of their potential ability. Many go all through life without ever discovering themselves. Research discloses that most of us never discover more than 25%, perhaps 30% of our real ability. There are millions of people who take jobs and stay with them for a few weeks, months, maybe even a year, then become discouraged and quit because of some personality in the organization or some other imaginary excuse. They start all over again in an entirely different kind of business. Thus, they lose the benefit of the training and knowledge obtained in the job or business they just left. Why do people do this? The answer is very simple. They do not think one half enough of themselves. They don't have enough faith, enough confidence, or enough respect for themselves. Many of us do not realize that the mind acts according to its own conception of itself. If our own concept of ourselves is small, then we will do and have small things. On the other hand, if we have a larger concept of ourselves, we naturally will do bigger things and attract the better things of life. You don't need to leave your present environment, your home, your business, or your job in order to find your opportunity. Your fortune, too, may be right in the very palm of your hand, but it can slip through your fingers like the sand through a child's hands if you procrastinate, waiting for the time to be just right to do something about it. If you wait and hesitate, it will be a good deal like placing a valuable keepsake away in the dresser drawer upstairs because the time is not just right to make use of it. Then, after the years go by, and you go for the keepsake, you will in all probability find it has crumbled to pieces. So it will be with us if we fail or hesitate to improve ourselves in advance over and above the requirements of our present daily jobs.
Technical knowledge versus handling people.
Let's unmask the illusion that success is altogether a matter of technical knowledge, or that all we ever need to know is what I like to call the screws, nuts, bolts, and wiggle pins about our jobs, profession, or undertaking. We're told by some of the world's ablest men that all the technical knowledge we can cram into our minds, while indeed important, still does not exceed in value to us any more than 1/4 of our qualifications. The other 3/4, making us full-fledged, is our ability to handle people, meaning get others to do what you want them to do without confusing or irritating them. Now, let's not belittle our technical knowledge, but let's don't settle for it. Our technical errors are comparatively few because we are such experts at our jobs, but it's shocking to observe how often we all bungle the job of handling people. What kind of merchandise, brand, gadget, or price can you offer to your customers that your competitors are not also willing to claim they offer? What kind of words or phrases are available to you in describing your product or service that are not also available to your competitor? Yet, even with the merchandise or service being equal, if you do a better job in catering to the feelings, pride, and emotions of the customer, you do not only get the business, but you hold it. If you have developed the ability to handle people, you just don't need anything else. But if you have not developed that ability, it doesn't matter much what else you have. Too many of us today are trying to substitute rules, logic, and technical knowledge for appreciation and a better understanding of the human feelings and emotions, notwithstanding the immutable fact that the minds of people today are set into action almost entirely by the way they feel. not by logic or reason. People are now living on frazzled nerves as never before, and their emotions are running high. When our own emotions get a little out of control, which is surprisingly often, we proceed to handle others with quickly chosen words, gestures, and decisions emanating entirely out of the way we feel. Let's reverse the procedure. Pitch your feelings out the window. Listen, think, and reason with yourself, and get hold of the other fellow by the handle of the way he feels, not by the handle of the way you feel. And you can handle him in the palm of your hand. When you look into a mirror, you expect to see your face reflected in that mirror. The other person is always looking for himself to be reflected like a mirror, his dreams, his imagination, and his point of view in some of the words he hears you say. Between your remarks that have to be based upon logic, rules, regulations, and instructions, put in some phrases that will have a direct bearing upon his pride, feelings, and emotions. Then you will be surprised how quickly he will acquiesce. Think of how mad you can get quickly. Then think of how happy and jubilant you can become quickly, all if just the right things happen at the right time. Now you have a yardstick with which to measure the wide range of human feelings, and you can see the opportunity and importance of handling people by the way they feel.
How emotions affect behavior.
I have a friend, Mr. J.L., in Atlanta, Georgia, who is in the automobile business. A customer who was very angry about his car came into J.L.'s place of business one day. He lambasted everyone he approached. Finally, J.L. invited him into his office and seated him on the opposite side of his desk. J.L. pulled up his chair and asked the customer to tell him his troubles. Now, here's a saying that's so fitting here. Quote, "Anger blows out the light of reason, but after a roaring hurricane expends its fury, the lull of calm sets in." End of quote. So it is generally with people. After a sweeping verbal tirade, remorse sets in. That happened in this case. Now watch it. J.L. listened until the man finished raving. Then instead of starting at once to argue back at the man, he just quietly looked at him with an expectant countenance, as though he expected the customer to have even more to say. He was flattering the customer to the extent that he was giving him credit for having a lot more to say. Here the customer found himself in a rather embarrassing position because he could not dig up any more. He had scraped the bottom and shot his wad. J.L. then said, "Mr. So-and-so, would you be kind enough to go over that last part again? I want to be very sure that I understand it thoroughly." That slowed down the customer almost to a standstill, and the going over didn't amount to very much. He started to talk again, but as usual to apologize for what he'd first said. If you wait until the exploding tirade of high-pitched emotions is finished and there is nothing more to be said, there comes a few seconds of complete silence. If you don't break that silence and let the other fellow do it, you will find he will feel remorseful and try to make apologies. Many times when people make a big mess of things, if we can keep still long enough, they usually wipe it up themselves. You can't overhaul the mind of the listener, but you can waltz with his feelings and emotions. Our own anxious feelings cause us to become so impatient that we overlook the necessity of waiting until the other fellow has his say. And by jumping at conclusions, we get our necks out. Then we have to reckon with the real issue that turns up in his mind, plus some other disturbing ideas which we have suggested to him by jumping in and talking too soon, too fast, and too much. The removal of human friction is 90% of the problem of handling people.
What people will do and will not do.
There are certain things that people generally will do. They will do readily, easily, and promptly things that are repeatedly suggested to them. It is said that 70% of the people respond easily to suggestion. People will follow old habits. They will follow old slogans and repeat spectacular remarks, often mentioning them as their own. Because vanity is one of the chief traits of people, they will work hard to establish superiority. This is a good trait. These are some of the things that people generally will not do. They will not look beyond their own self-interest. Their first thought is, where do I come in? Or what will I gain? New ideas have hard sledding because people will not accept changes willingly. It is conceded that people are negative by nature. They will not fight for an issue if they can possibly fight against it. People will not differ from the crowd. Therefore, we can appreciate the truth of the old saying, people follow like sheep. People will not usually exert themselves beyond the point of absolute necessity, and they will not act unless they are prodded. There is an abundance of human reactions we can classify as general, and there are many exceptions to the general rule. However, we should make plans and policies according to the general rule of things, not by the exceptions. If we gear our conclusions, business plans, or operations to the exceptions, we are doomed to failure. As a general rule, this is the way to handle the little fellow who thinks he is a big shot. Don't say, I'm going to prove it to you. Isn't it hard enough to prove something to the listener without warning him in advance, in which case he may build up a stone wall of defense or close his mind? Then, with all the logic and reasoning at our command, we will be unable to penetrate that stone wall. In making a presentation to the listener, many of us strive to impress upon him that we are salesmen. We would be able to make much better progress if it were possible for us to have written across our chest the words, I am not a salesman. Most buyers do not want to deal with the man who gives the impression that he is capable of exercising his influence over them. People like to feel that they are buying or making decisions on their own judgment as a result of the information the salesman has given to them. One of the most difficult to handle is the little fellow who thinks he's a big shot. Approach him in this way. Now, Mr. Bowman, I have an idea I want to explain to you. In all probability, you already know about it and have long ago forgotten about it, but this is the idea. Then proceed to explain it. The little fellow will listen real well. You flattered him by first telling him that he probably has already thought about it, used it, or knew about it before. He will now be more susceptible. It's much better not to appear that you have definitely set out to convince him. People must be convinced as if you convinced them not, and ideas unknown to them proposed as ideas forgot.
How to handle an argument.
Let the other fellow do most of the talking. When we repress the other fellow's ideas or opinions by making him hold back and wait while we talk, then what he thinks he wants to say becomes tremendously exaggerated in importance. Let him have his say first. Don't interrupt with a crushing, surefire comeback while the iron is hot. While listening, don't show a belligerent attitude. If the expression on your face reflects an argumentative attitude, it will destroy your chance to persuade. Your real object is not to defeat, but to persuade. In the very beginning, ask questions instead of talking too much. When the other person propounds a controversial point and lays it in your lap, don't be too quick to defend. On the other hand, in a friendly modulated tone of voice, ask him why, or what makes you think so. Seldom is he prepared to answer because his thinking has been devoted to emphasizing his point. Asking questions in the first part of an argument forces your opponent to disclose his main defense. In practically all discussions, the final conclusions are made from what is said in the last part. Therefore, have your say last. A good listener wins arguments and makes friends. People would rather have you listen to what they have to say than to have you do what they want you to do. If you can talk, you can handle people. If you can listen too. Listen this way. Drop everything. Don't write. Don't direct someone. Don't light a cigarette or look out the window. Lean forward slightly. Look straight at the speaker and listen with a sparkle in your eye, as though you might be thinking, gee, this is the most wonderful thing I ever heard in all my life. Just pour it on. Drink in his remarks with intense interest. Such an audience will be so flattering that he will think to himself, my, isn't he a nice fellow? Or isn't she lovely? There is nothing you can ever do that will make a person like you more than to listen intently to what he has to say. When the other fellow finishes and you begin to talk, You'll be surprised at how quickly he will lean and listen intently to you, seeming actually to imitate what you have just done. Instinctively, he wants to repay to you the nice compliment you've just paid to him. Let's see what has happened to you in a few fleeting seconds. First, you made somebody like you by listening intently to him. Second, while he was talking, you were able to select just the right words to use back, all predicated upon what you heard him say, thereby avoiding sticking your neck out and jumping at conclusions. Third, you prepared for yourself an unprejudiced, receptive, kindly, and open-minded audience. This is one of the most important requisites for the successful handling of people. It signifies that you have forgotten to consider his special interest and experience in your remarks. We hold the attention of others by blending our discussion with the things, places, ideas, and so forth with which they have had experience. If what we say to people doesn't tie in quickly and easily with their interest and experience, they will ignore it altogether. We cannot scatter our presentation, explanation, or instructions in a disconnected fashion. People will not bother to gather up the pieces and put them together for us. In formulating our remarks, we must put the pieces together ourselves in proper sequence and make sure we are considering the special interest and experience of the listener. Then we rivet his attention to our remarks. Let's discuss losing the cooperation of others. Far too often, a department head expresses himself only from the point of view of his own department. He seldom sees or thinks of the problem under discussion from the viewpoint of the other departments, as the chief executive must look at it. For example, the executive is deeply concerned about an important problem. At a meeting of department heads, Mr. A proposes a simple and workable solution. When it comes to Mr. B's time to have his say, he goes against the suggestion with the argument that it would involve extra work in his department, although Mr. A's suggestion was for the common good of the company and a workable idea. The department head today, who is big enough to consider problems and suggestions from the point of view of other departments as well as his own, will achieve great heights. There is an unfaltering, crying demand for just such men today. Most people are good at almost anything they attempt to do alone. Few are successful in doing a good job in working with other people. Yet the progress of great men has been made by their ability to work in cooperation with others. In conversation with others, discuss the things upon which you and the other fellow are in agreement. Avoid to the very last discussing things upon which you do not agree. Make a mountain out of the things upon which you agree, and a molehill of the things upon which you do not agree. By a reverse procedure, we encourage a no response. Once a person declares no, his pride demands that he remain consistent, and we find ourselves immediately at a disadvantage. As long as you can keep yes responses forthcoming, the entire organism is thrown into an open, receptive attitude, rendering the man with whom you are dealing more susceptible to your influence.
Taking the sting out of criticism.
If we could see through the eyes of the other fellow, we could easily understand why he behaves as he does. It is very difficult for us to understand his actions because as we examine, analyze, or criticize him, we look at the matter and pass judgment almost entirely through our eyes of logic and reason. Yet, most usually, the act or behavior of the other fellow was committed through his eyes of emotion. Human acts are committed far more often through the dictates of feelings and emotions than through logic and reason. We can criticize and at the same time leave out the sting. Suppose you approach someone working on a specific operation. The workman may be new on the job and may not be doing it exactly as it ought to be done. Under those circumstances, you might be well advised to say something like this: I believe you have a definite talent for that job, and I believe you're going to be able to do it real well. But let's try it this way. Then take over and show him how you want it done. When we approach a person in this manner, we've taken the sting out of criticism by including a sincere compliment. Criticism should always be accompanied by some praise. Avoiding selfishness is another important consideration in winning the cooperation of fellow workers. A certain amount of selfishness is to be found in almost every industrial plant or business office. Envy, jealousy, or selfishness indicates something very small in the person who exhibits it. When you show you are happy to see someone else succeed, you will soon find others pulling for your advancement and success. Through the years, I have watched foremen and department heads in large business firms attend meetings where prizes and awards were being handed out. I have seen these men earnestly congratulate the other fellow who wins. Few losers show that kind of unselfish sportsmanship. Grasp the hand of the winner and say, "I'm mighty glad you won," and really mean what you say. If you can do just that, you will be popular among your associates. Most of us compliment people upon their achievements in a field in which they know they are outstanding. Generally, people aspire to achieve success or perfection in another field, apart from the one in which they are recognized. For instance, one might be a splendid artist, and though he would naturally appreciate a compliment on his paintings, he is already aware of his accomplishments in that field. The same person, however, may aspire to be an excellent speaker and wish to be able to impress an audience. Yet he is a little in doubt about his speaking ability. If we can compliment him on his speaking ability, he would in all probability appreciate it far more than a compliment on his paintings. In other words, people appreciate compliments most about the things in which they aspire to excel, but are a little in doubt.
Are we really salesmen?
Because we live in a nation with the most money and the greatest buying power, and because of the tremendous eagerness of Americans to buy, we think we're great salesmen. Yet the following facts tell a far different story. It is generally conceded that more than 90% of the sales during boom years were not really sales at all, but purchases made by the customers themselves of their own initiative. Furthermore, 7 out of 10 sales, which are actually made by the influence of tact, courtesy, and salesmanship, are made by fewer than 20% of the salespeople. Therefore, 80% of the salespeople are overlooking an opportunity and will soon be lost among the unemployed unless their mental attitude changes in answer to a crying demand for courteous and tactful sales personnel. Your greatest problem from birth to death is getting other people to do what you want them to do without confusing or irritating them. That's salesmanship, notwithstanding all the fancy phrases that are used in a vain attempt to define it in some other way. People will not buy things, they buy what the thing will do for them. They buy the convenience, service, beauty, color, light, speed, safety, bigness, flavor, and so forth. They buy all these items, many times when they cannot even afford them. So in your presentation, elaborate on these qualities instead of the thing itself or the technicalities in connection with it. Let's picturize this point. After listening to a thorough technical coaching from a factory representative, a young salesman was approached by an elderly lady in a hardware store. She came in to buy a small heater for her living room. The young salesman had studied all the technicalities and all the details about the stove. Therefore, in his sales presentation, he explained all about the gauge of steel, the tricky controls, the non-corroding bolts, oversized chambers, and other technicalities. Finally, he ran out of material, but he felt he had done a thorough job of selling. So he looked at his customer, who seemingly was unimpressed, and said, "Now, lady, I've explained everything I know about the stove. Would you like to know anything more about it?" The old lady looked at him and said, "Yes. Will it keep an old lady warm?" She, like other customers, was interested not in the technicalities of the thing, but what it would do for her. In your efforts to influence and convince people, there may be several points you wish to get over to them. Some salesmen plow into their presentation with point following point in rapid succession, and with the stress on price, technicalities, and cold logic. Each feature point should be followed immediately with a forceful explanation of just how that feature would benefit the customer from the standpoint of convenience, safety, speed, beauty, service, and what have you. It's the way in which you tie these points to the feelings, experience, interest, pride, and other wants that really influences him. It's not what you say to people that counts. It's what they believe of what you say that really counts.
Keep in step with your listener.
In your effort to get a point across to your listener, whether it's a customer, someone working under your supervision, your friends, or associates, it's necessary to keep in step with their minds. When we approach people or they approach us, many times their minds are running in a direction far different from that of our own. Let's use the following as an example. If you were attempting to hop on a slowly moving freight car or streetcar while it's in motion, you would not run at it at right angle. If you did, by the time you reached the car, it would have gone by, and you would land on the ground. To make an effective landing, you would run alongside that car or vehicle in the same direction and at the same speed at which it is moving. So it is with the minds of men. If you approach a man from one direction while his mind is going in an opposite direction, a clash of minds usually results. The other person will not slow down or step up his speed of receptivity or understanding to synchronize with your speed of presentation. The solution is in your hands. Your problem is to watch the other fellow and try to discover what he is thinking, taking into consideration his appearance, actions, looks, and by all means his words. Try to judge his speed of receptivity. Then, as you present your point of view, you are more likely to make an effective mental connection. If we fail to get in step with the listener's mind, it is quite likely we will confuse and sometimes even irritate him. Such negligence on our part often leaves an opening for others to jump at conclusions as to the real purpose and meaning of our presentation. Now let's put these principles to work and get a nose ahead. Success is not so difficult because there are so few making an all-out effort for it. Once a man gets out in front of the pack, even if only a nose ahead, the going is easier. Why? Because out there the competition narrows down. The man who earns $20,000 a year does not need to have 5 times more ability than the man who earns only $4,000 a year. Many people think there is an enormous difference in the ability of the man who is outstanding and the other fellow of ordinary accomplishments. Such a conviction is discouraging and holds back many who otherwise might make an earnest effort to get a nose ahead. Here's an example. The winner of a horse race made $15,000, and the horse that came in second in the same race made only $3,000. Just because the winner made 5 times more money did not mean he could run around that track 5 times faster. He struggled the whole distance to get just a nose ahead. So it is with people. The other fellow is not years or miles ahead of you, but perhaps just a nose ahead. So don't sell yourself short. It is said that 1 out of 10 people today actually carries away 9/10 of the world's purse, the championships, the applause, and the promotions. Not because he's a superman, but because he does a better job in handling people. Don't get discouraged. Just get a nose ahead.
You are worth $500,000.
At birth, you inherited $500,000, not dollars, but hours. You alone have absolute control over the investment of this $500,000. You wouldn't think of throwing $5 bills in the gutter and watching them wash away, but how about the indifferent, careless waste of 25% and sometimes 50% of our time just because we have never learned how to invest it? You cannot attain financial security either by saving money or by spending it. Your personal money problem can be solved only by the wise investment of your time. If the spending of your time is handled with good common sense, the same kind of common sense you use in making financial investments, then your personal money problem, which is inescapably involved, will be solved at the very same time. Any fool can save up dollars, but the wisest of men cannot save up opportunity. The greatest era of opportunity this generation has ever seen is here, now. But it can slip through your fingers like the sand through a child's hands. If you lay your opportunity away now, waiting for the time to be just right, when you reach for it later on, you'll find it has crumbled to pieces. Doing the mediocre things in life when greater things are possible constitutes one of the greatest tragedies in human endeavor. Jessie Rittenhouse, in her famous poem, said this: "I bargained with life for a penny, but life would pay no more." Make your bargain, then, with life for something real big and worthwhile. Take hold of your job, not with the tips of your fingers, but with that grip and tenacity of purpose that commands you to do that which is really big and worthwhile. You know more about yourself than all the other people in the whole world put together. Therefore, it's an inside job. Then, in moments of meditation, as a man sits alone at night on the side of his bed with one sock in his hand, while the rest of the world is seemingly asleep, he thinks, and he thinks seriously. Am I any better off now than I was 5 years ago? How about the next 5 years? Here alone a man does not fool himself. Ralph Waldo Emerson said, "Alone a man is sincere, but upon the approach of another party, then hypocrisy begins." So be ever conscious of the fact that there is no power in the whole world that can lift you up higher and hold you up longer than your own enthusiasm, self-confidence, and faith in yourself. Men who have succeeded in accomplishing the goal of their own choice backed it up by persistency with an unfaltering, abiding faith in their own ability. That is the kind of faith that was forged by our forefathers in the early days in the fires of human experience. There is no sacrifice or price you have to pay for using the principles I have discussed. On the other hand, there is awaiting you a reward of success in abundant proportions if you put these principles to work now, in time. In hesitating, we never know, but what the hour or day passing unused is a jewel fallen into the sea of infinite and gone forever.